Before we talk regarding the truth about Teutonic Magick by Edred Thorsson, I thought I would show you the runes in their two forms. Futhark, Gu, Hanij, Ipe, Zis, Tub, M, Lung, Do, and each of them has their appropriate rune stave. So if you see these, they're obviously referring to the ones on the spoke. And these are divided into three groups: livestock or wealth, wild cattle, thorn, deity of wisdom, a ride or a vehicle, a torch, a gift, joy or victory as the first group. And then we have hail or the frost demon, need, ice, harvest, yew, basket, elk or claw, sun, just God, birch, horse, human, water, a division of earth, or fertility deity, or deity of earth, rather than division of earth, might be the better way to say that. Then we have day, and we have the homeland. And we can divide these into elements, can't we? F-U, H-N, T-B on one, T-H-A, I-J, and E-M on the other. Then we have R-K, E-I-P, and L-N-G on the other. And then finally we have G-W, Z-S, and D-O. So, with that, whatever spells closest to our language can be used with the runes. Now, carving them on wood, a lot of people prefer has to be oak, and using blood, or at least something that represents that, is an important way that the runes were made. But there's more to Teutonic magic than just alphabet stuff. And let's be real, all cultures did their alphabet stuff. And there is reason to think this originated before that. But it certainly originates before the Kabbalah that people talk about. The Teutonic people used this as their alphabet. Some people call them Germanic. Some people call them Celtic. There's different ways to address this. And because of the relation to the Slavic, well, if you find runes among the Slavic people going tens of thousands of years earlier before those people, that is the origin of the runes itself. But the language and their particulars about it, like there's not the evidence of the carving them into separate bits and bleeding on them and, putting blood in the carved spots. There's, not the evidence of this. Now the Eddas conveyed of their tradition, but if we're going to be honest, the Germanic people probably did have a variety of cults. Monotheism to utter pantheism. And they had a sense of their folk culture, which is, of course, most personified by the O. And the relation to the cycles of the sun, which is most personified by the S. And they needed to defend their place among this. Their observances of the cross quarters, solstices, and equinoxes relate to their use of the abundance of nature, of their seeking out by hunting, their taming, so that they can ride and accomplish stuff. Their use of fire, their sense of offerings and success, the dangers that lie ahead in both cold and water features, humanity, femininity, what needs to go through with the town councils and all. How to cultivate what they need, the importance of wisdom and personal fertility, and the pitfalls in life, and of course one's own sense of material possessions is very important. But to truly do a Teutonic form of magic, we need to get ourselves into more than just the alphabet and some particular terminology. Although we can look at the Gothi and Githya as the male and female magicians, the magicians that convey, express, and practice the mythology of their people. And there's more than the aspect of what that means for a person's culture. Now, the spiritual worlds are not just going to lay down and serve you because you have the right symbol. You need to learn how to work with them or work outside of that. Now, the world was, there was more to this to existence than this lower world. There's the world of what people usually call deities. Asgard, the hell, is where the dead go. The light elf home, where the light beings go, and the people who really accomplish in life. And the swart elf home, and these are sort of opposites of the light beings in the various categories. They're kind of related kind of structurally, much like, you have like Kabbalistic sort of arrangements. So it's kind of that sort of principle, is that there's sort of a balancing between the light and the dark forces. The Wayne home, or the Veneer home. And then there's the Etten home, which is the home of forces. And the Nephil home, where there's the cosmic heat and cold. Sort of the positive and negative forces in a way, and between them are the potentials of the others. Now, Midgard is where we are, and our consciousness is what we really are, and it's formed on the Yggdrasil tree, and the Yggdrasil is where we're supposed to be able to get to, right? And we are referred to the trees. And so this is again seen as the straight line: Hel, Svartalf, Midgard, Light Elf home. Home is Helm. Helm is how you say it. And Asgard, and then the Muspel home opposite to the Nephil home, and above that the Wayne home down to the Etten home. And the more people knew certain things, the more there were different words for these things. Now, a lot of people have been out of shape about the troth, particularly Odinism. Oh, Odinism is such a threat to us all, and it's like, no. And some people say it's Asatru, which is the troth of what are called gods, or perhaps you could say, it's similar to the faith or the loyalty. And you could say, yeah, that's a pretty good name for faith, loyalty to the divine. And as things from other cultures were learned, they maintained among the Germanic people certain senses to lay behind it. And there's started to be extra tribal structures of this stuff. But you work with the blood and the soil. And any people has that substrate to work with. And so there's a folk way of things. Now people saying you have to be the religion of your ancestors. That's not true. because there's a structure of consciousness that we all can work with. Now, certainly our inflections, it makes a lot more sense that our inflections of spirituality are related to our ancestry and where we are. So the Vanir relates to the natural things, and the Aser relates to the consciousness or the structures of society. So people consider themselves Vitkis as they try to emulate the patterns that people take part in. And certainly we do refer to each part of existence. So the Asatru, the real Asatru, is a belief in these different realms and a relationship with existence. Now, the definitions that people have for some of these things are not quite it. Yes, there's the harvest close. There's the regeneration time of year where you can particularly kill a lot of boars and or whatever you need to fatten up for the winter, or whatever you feel might not make it through the winter. So to be sure that the animals you have are going to make it through winter, you might as well kill some of them now. That's one of the ideas. And then the forces are about ready to return. And then nature's making its way out again. And then night itself becomes sort of a mystery, but, it becomes easier to play again. And then with the summer solstice, the power that drives the years at full force. And then you have, pulling back to the family and the structures of government and stuff. And then with the fall equinox, you celebrate the peak of the harvest. Of course, there's different harvests of different times, and it's important to, if you're going to employ some of these seasonal festivals, it's best to consider which of the things are going to be, taken part, because you need a story and you need to connect it to your relationship with the unseen. Now, blood rituals are, the blot. And the blot was done as a bletzion, as a blessing. And Christianity had its sense of that, but they didn't sprinkle blood about. And you can say that these observations were, different cultures brought it up at different times. Some people are going to interpret things. Some people are going to relate things. Some people are going to dedicate things. There's going to be invocation and evocation and envocation and, all that sort of stuff. Now, you may not decide ahead of time which entities or which names you're going to use in terms of divine qualities or other sorts of mention of the spiritual realms, but, And so how is this going to build up? Are you going to change your state through what you do? For what you take in, or is it going to be something that you're going to offer? And if there's a mutual thing, a fragment of that would be left. Now, I would say a tenth is there's going to, so cursing, blessing, that's a thing to consider very strongly. And it's important to return a part. Or, sort of like the Krishnatarian thing, you're going to look at what society has put forward, and you're going to offer that yourself, right? You know what I mean? And they leave a part, and they point out that there's something that can be done in the future. And so these rituals encode truths. So how many runes are you going to have? 16, 30 among the Anglo-Saxons, 16 of the Scandinavians. I, in my art, have used different forms. The groups of 8 are the Atir, so there's the families. I've already gone over the language stuff. And when you do these rites, particularly by yourself, you want to think of their names, of their meanings, and nowadays people are using dyes. And there's symbols. The rune staves, people call them. And the called rest of fear, which is another things. And these symbols go beyond language, right? You can put something under your pillow. You can cast something down. You could put something towards your, towards developing your religious relationship. Something that will bring good fortune, or at least, there's belief towards that will drive off the bad. There's stuff regarding protection. Pretty much any purpose, there's some sort of extra little rune stave, you could call it. And, well, you don't have to use them as charms or amulets. You can think of them as something completing the ritual. That it doesn't have its power. You're the one with the power, and it brings that back. It proves that you know the mention. Now, similarly, with alms and ogums, as people call them, we have the alternative way of reading them, and see we can kind of understand how these Irish, Scottish symbols are. Now, these things are considered of their past, and it's something that has survived with the fragments of their culture. And as I said, traveling, the environment, marriage, experience beyond oneself, experience in oneself, the involvement of sexuality or violence to alter the states. Sympathetic magic, You find something in a category, something that represents something, and that is what you're using. Certain animals are their dead bodies or substances can become important for certain rites. But I would say that you don't necessarily have to have the thing on hand. Certainly somebody from even in a prison cell with their little piece of paper and stuff, they can do stuff, although some prisons have tried to suppress the religious freedom of people who aren't Christian. Now, I understand for health reasons that they can't, the blood on things and, how much of that is consensual, and they can't really be testing all the blood of everybody, so they kind of save doing that for, signs of violence that they have to investigate. And people think of the pacts that people form are something about the Saturnal, or the negative or the dark. But they didn't view these things as moral polars. But the Teutonic people did relate things to the play between them. And of course, with all this, there's a direction towards the future, a direction of fulfilling your weird, your destiny. And this involves the spirit of the times. It involves exploration of the different aspects of yourself. So you can think of yourself in terms of the Asatru as some sort of plant or tree. And particularly when you're young or old and frail, you can be misshapen. Your neglect can go places. And so it's important that everybody is deliberate and accepts that you can have fun, that your life is full of desires and responses to everything you know exists.